Hi and welcome to another tutorial from Valentia Photography Workshops. This one is about understanding and using shutter speeds in your camera. Hi, I'm Stephen Power. I'm a photographer and photography teacher on the west of Ireland in County Kerry, and in this brief tutorial I just want to run through camera shutter speeds, how you use them and how they relate to each other. And I just want to ask, if you wouldn't mind, if you have time, please click the subscribe button to stay tuned for more videos from Valentia Photography Workshops. So, I've got a list here of typical shutter speeds going from 1 second. In most cameras, the slowest they will go is about 30 seconds. I'll come back to that in a minute. We can see from here that going faster from 1 second, the time for a one stop change is usually half the previous one. So from 1 second to half a second is one stop, and you've halved the time of the shutter speed. From half a second to a quarter of a second is half the time, and so on. And when the time is halved or doubled, for example from a quarter to a half, that we call that a one-stop change. So there's twice as much or half as much difference between the shutter speed time. Most of the time that difference is half. There's a couple of points where it's not, it's slightly different. So for example, from 1/8 to a 15th is not quite a half. But that's how it works in a camera. Again, from a 60th, 1/60th of a second to 125th of a second is not quite half. From 250th of a second, it goes like this. So I'll move up there. It's halved again, a 500th of a second, 1,000th of a second, 2,000, 4,000. Some cameras go up to 8,000 if you're lucky, but it's rare that you'll actually need that type of speed. Coming down from 1 second, these numbers are quite similar. So we go down from 1 second to 2 seconds, to 4 seconds, to 8 seconds, to 15 seconds, and to 30 seconds, which is usually about where most cameras stop. Here's a quick rule of thumb for using shutter speeds in different lighting conditions. For slower shutter speeds, if you want to make the shutter speed slower and you're in daylight, then try reducing the ISO. Or if you can work with the depth of field, close the aperture down. I'm looking at ISO and depth of field and using apertures in other videos, so look out for those. And the second rule of thumb, I'll move it over there. For faster shutter speeds in low light, increase the ISO or open the aperture up. So two basic rules of thumb for using apertures, or the ISO to change your shutter speeds. And there's good reasons to do either or of those things, and also reasons not to do those. And I'll look at those another time. So a quick recap in terms of what shutter speeds can do. So This is a shot where I've deliberately reduced the shutter speed. I took this as 1/4 of a second, in low light, handheld, and I just wanted to emphasize the blurriness to try and show some movement in the people dancing. Of course, if you want to stop movement, then you need to have a faster shutter speed. Another way you might use a slower shutter speed is when there is no movement in the scene at all, not even any wind, but you want to have a wide depth of field, so you'll need a very small aperture. So closing the aperture down sometimes, depending on the lighting, might automatically produce or cause you to set a very slow shutter speed. So in that case, it can be useful, but you will perhaps need the camera on a tripod and make sure there's nothing blowing around in the scene. Now, this is a typical fast shutter speed shot taken at 750th of a second, and there isn't much blur in that at all. And so often sports or birds and that type of photography is one that lends itself typically to fast shutter speeds. I started as a music photographer and I'm still doing it to some extent. And this is an example of a shot I took hundreds of years ago that uses a reasonably slow shutter speed, about 1/30th of a second, I think. So you can actually see his hand slightly blurred there because he was actually shaking his fist. So in that case, I needed to increase the ISOs in the film and overdevelop it so that I could use a reasonable shutter speed. Without increasing the ISO, the whole thing would have been quite blurry. Okay, so that's a quick overview of how to use shutter speeds. Hope you found it helpful. Please click the subscribe button to stay in touch for more videos, and I'll see you next time.